embarrassing. We're in my new office. If you've not seen my office tour yet, I'll put a link to it here. But we're here in my office, and as you can see, this really isn't a streaming studio, but we tried to build one out in here to do as good as possible. And so every week we kind of change things. It introduces new things. So we've got it figured out. I'm almost positive for next week's episode, which is on Gideon. But this episode had even kind of more audio problems. If you go on the Facebook stream, you can hear like the weird echo and stuff. But we're able to get good, solid, clean audio, drop it in the video, but it's just going to be a static image across. But content's here. Bible is metal. This is the story of Deborah, which is super, super metal. Real quick so we make sure we get the maps on. Yep, okay, we're good. Batch camera one. All right, we got maps today. We're stoked about that. So we're getting things going on. We got some friends popping on. Big fan of the Bible is Metal. It's great having you on here. If you want to go back and catch this, these are archived on Facebook. I also upload them on YouTube, generally on the weekends. So we're talking about, we want some swag now. We need some Bible is Metal swag.
Yes, we do need some swag.
So that's kind of on our conversation on the docket this week. Is that so? Jumping into the story of Deborah and Barak and Jabal and Jael and
a whole bunch of names.
There's a whole bunch of names going on. What's up, Bob? It's good to see you, man.
What's up, Bob?
Well, let's just go ahead and jump on in. So Graham, something we're going to start off with is Graham's story.
My story.
And then you can kind of ask me some questions, and then we'll kind of talk about some stuff. All right, so we got that today.
All right, so I'm going to need y'all to bear with me. There are a lot of names in this story. All right, so basically, we're leaving off where Ehud left off. All right, Ehud's dead now. Israel has been at peace for what, 40 years?
80 years.
80 years. So
80
a whole
years.
generation, okay?
Or two generations. Two generations.
Literally 2 generations, okay? And so, again, there's this whole theme in Judges about how the Israelites just keep messing up. And, we're not even halfway through this book, so obviously they mess up again.
Yep.
So, they're subjugated by the Canaanites for 20 years, okay? The king of the Canaanites, his name was Jabin.
Yeah.
Jabin. Yeah. His name was Jabin. And he's not very important to this story, but his general named Sisera is very important. He has an army of 900 chariots, and he uses that to brutally oppress the Israelites. So this happens for about 20 years, and the Israelites finally call out to the Lord for help. And as always, he delivers. So this brings us to Deborah. Deborah is a prophetess. I saw that in this book. They call them a prophetess. I didn't know.
It's a lady prophet.
Yeah, a lady prophet.
Prophet.
Yeah. I mean, she's the leader of just the Israelites in general.
Yeah. So she's like the judge, the person.
Yeah. She's the big leader. I mean, So basically, she, with the help of God, devises a plan, basically, to take out Sisera and his 900 chariots. Because that's the power that's keeping, that's subjugating them right now. So she calls upon Barak, and she basically, which Barak is a general kind of
like a warlord.
He commands an army.
Yeah, he's over. Is he over the tribe of Naphtali or Natalie?
I don't really know.
Let me get my Bible out.
It doesn't really say, honestly.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. I think he's like the chief ruler of Natalie.
He's a
it was from Kadesh Natalie and said to him. So he's kind of like the head of that tribe.
Yeah, he's just basically another general, I guess, sort of, right? Yeah. So she devises a plan to lead Sisera and his 900 chariots to Mount Tabor. I believe that's how you pronounce it. Tabor.
Yeah.
And so, funny enough, Barak basically he's kind of scared to fight these 900 chariots. I mean, obviously that's quite the force to deal with. So he asked her, "Are you going to come with me?" And so, funny enough, Deborah says, "Of course I'm going to go with you, but you're going to lose all of the glory because a woman is going to get the glory of this battle." Now, keep in mind, she doesn't say Deborah is going to get the glory of this battle, and that will come back later. So, basically, Deborah leads Sisera and his 900 chariots to Mount Tabor. And Barak, he sits there waiting. He kind of gets antsy, as you should when you're about to go up against a literal, just huge army.
You're going to battle.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to battle, he's getting antsy. And Deborah says, what does she say? I don't know the exact quote. She basically says, stop being a wuss. God has given you these people. Go and raise, just annihilate them.
Yeah.
So that's exactly what he does. He goes down with 10,000 Israelites.
But she also says, like, you're not going to get the glory.
Yeah. Nope. She said that
like,
earlier.
a woman's going to get the glory.
Yep. So he goes down there and he kills every one of them. There's not a single one left. Everyone is destroyed except Sisera, who flees. So he flees to Jael. So the wife of Heber the Kenites. All right. So basically, the Kenites are this allied kingdom tribe.
So they're these people. So the Kenites, we meet them in we meet them in Exodus, and they're kind of like they're part of Midian, which is another country, which is another one of these like weird descendants. Mm-hmm. Midian came from a descendant of Abraham, not through the line of Israel. But he had more kids after Sarah died, mm-hmm. and God super blessed him. And so they're cousins, and the Kenites, so Moses' father-in-law was a Kenite, and they're these just nomadic wanderers. Mm-hmm. And Moses' father's clan pretty much linked up with the Israelites while they're on the Exodus and came into the Promised Land with them. And they're like friendly cousins.
I got you. So. Friendly cousins. Okay. So basically, they're allies, all right? So Sisera goes to Jael or
something like that,
however you want to say it. And he goes to her tent asking for her to basically hide him from the coming Israelite army of 10,000 people. So she says, of course I'll do that. So she hides him in her tent, and while he's fast asleep, she takes basically, what you stick in the ground, like a peg, mm-hmm. like a tent peg, like a wooden tent peg and a mallet, and she drives it through his head and just kills him instantly. And so basically, when Deborah earlier said a woman will get the glory, she's talking about Jael.
Mm-hmm. Not herself.
Yep, not herself.
Yeah. So this story is crazy. What, the camera went off? Yeah. Here, hit to the camera 2 real quick. All right. Camera went off. Let's get this one back on. And then let's try it now, Noah.
Yeah, let's see what we got going. Oh,
we back? All right, we're back. Manual focus. All right, so got that. Okay, we're good to go.
Yeah, awesome.
So where were we?
You just said the story is insane, which it is.
Yeah. So the story is insane, and what we have, this there in focus too. Let's focus. Right, there we go. Rock and roll. So this story is nuts because so much of this story is also the geography of Israel. Because I was just kind of talking with you and sharing stuff with you, and you're like, "What?"
Yes, crazy stuff.
Crazy stuff. So Noah, go over to the little GoPro. I'm just gonna come over here and point. So this is what we have going on. Okay. So Deborah is like. So we got Jerusalem, Bethel. So Deborah is like right here where you see my finger pointing. Okay? The guy that everybody's talking about, they're going to go fight, is way up here at Hatzor. Okay? Where they end up having this battle is down in here. And then Mount Tabor is right there. So you see, this kind of is taken and it's encapsulating like the entire whole area. I'm going to show another map. This is going to get super nerdy. See my Biblegram? Of course. Oh, is it right behind me? So this is the thing. When we've talked about this, we have to understand there's a power vacuum that's going on right now in Israel. And what's going on, if we dig into the like legit, let's see if this goes in. All right, we're looking there. Okay, so what you see, all this green right here, these are plains, and all of this yellow, these are mountains. And so what you see is, where it says the Philistines are right here. So all of this green is essentially like a massive highway. I can go back to the big camera, Noah. It is this massive highway that the Egyptians and then everybody to the north uses to fight each other.
Okay.
Okay? And so what's going at this point in time in all that big, huge green space, when it said that the king who's over Hatzor was subjugating the Israelites, what that really meant was there were plantations that were like tens of thousands of acres, and all they did was grow wheat for Egypt. And because Egypt began like losing their standing, there's this massive power vacuum. So this guy now is trying to maintain his ties to Egypt, but he also doesn't have any problems on his own. And so all of this, like this whole battle goes down in all of that, those low-lying areas with these crazy high mountains around them. And so the geography, this whole thing is getting used, but a couple things that are kind of to start off into it. So last week we talked about how the story of Ehud, and they were at Jericho.
Yes.
And this week we're at Hatzor. Now the interesting thing is, in the whole story, if we look at it, is that both Jericho and Hatzor were fortified cities that the people of God took and destroyed 150 years before this in their conquest of the Holy Land. Hatzor was actually the only town that was completely destroyed, wiped away. The book of Joshua, it says, put to the sword, like men, women, kids, dead,
wiped
burned,
out.
everything. So you have these people that are now like no longer even able to like hold on to these first pieces of what's going on. And this is a Canaanite, and this is actually the last story that we really hear about the Canaanites. After this is other people from outside Israel, because remember that they are just like, everyone's just brokering for power, and this is the crossroads that Israel lives in. And so all of this fighting is not necessarily like, oh, we don't like God's people. It's just like this area has been in conflict, because to get anywhere you have to go through here. So all of these towns and these cities that you hear about are sitting up either on top of these ridge lines and these hills, or they're in the middle of these things that are called tells, which are like these massive fortified hills in the middle of these plains. So like the whole thing about the guy having 900 chariots. So if you look at like archaeology and you look at the story of like where we are in Judges right now, the Israelites were able to stay alive and maintain their power on top of these hills and these ridges. But down in the plains, they can't, because chariots.
It's like the Riders of Rohan.
Yeah, exactly. Riders of Rohan. So you have in this story just that side of thing that's going on. And then like, we'll talk about the battle, and then we'll talk about the iron, the spike through the head.
Yeah, the peg.
And then we'll the peg, and then we'll talk about Deborah. Let's kind of do it in that way. So what we see really in this battle is they get to this river, the Kishon. And what's crazy is that river, and it's known for a couple of different battles inside of Scripture, but that river means the river of slaughter. Like it's still where the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, like their crazy military, they still use the Kishon River to like train in the marshes and that kind of thing, because that's what's going on. It's super, super wet. And the second that any like a big rainstorm, something like that happens, it goes from like this like little creek to this giant just marshland. So you have these guys, they're funneled into a certain port in Mount Tabor. The Israelites are using the geography to their advantage. And these guys that are riding in chariots, you would think that if you're riding in a chariot, it's an iron chariot. Typically probably means the axle has been reinforced with iron. They're also wearing like chainmail armor kind of that goes all the way to their ankles. So they're super, super protected. So imagine you're in this marsh river.
Yeah.
Water comes in, and then all of a sudden your chariots are worthless. And then you're trying to get around in the mud wearing like a whole like moo of armor. And so you have that thing going on, and then what's crazy is there's a ridge line that runs outside of Mount Tabor to where this battle could have happened, that's raised about 30 or 40 feet off the ground, I think. That it almost like it tells the story that like that Sisera like runs on this to get to this tent to try to find some relief. Now, a couple things are also cool going. The Kenites were known to be like wandering nomads who were metal workers. The Israelites, at this point in time, they were so subjugated. In fact, when King Saul's going a few hundred years later, talks about there's not even a sword in Israel. Like none of the Israeli people like even had a sword. They were having to fight with like farm implements.
Oh man!
But Saul and his son had a sword, so that sort of thing. So this Kenites, them being the metal workers and him being allied to this king in Hatzor, if you have a bunch of warriors, you want to be allied to the guy who's going to need all of your stuff. And so you see this, the Jael guy kind of, even though his family and his whole like clan has been allowed to be in the promised land, to be beneficiaries and live peacefully there, you see him kind of like jumping ship, helping out this other warlord instead. And then you have his wife coming in, tent stake, like through the head. And it's like this picture, I can imagine, this sounds so gross. Like I can imagine like this stake like completely going through his like skull and his brain, and like, it pins him to the ground.
Oh,
like imagine that. That's kind of the way the Bible's like he's pinned to the ground.
Yeah, it's literally just like she's like nailing him into the ground.
Yeah, and then you have Deborah. So a couple of things. So she's a judge, which means that she is there, and she's like pretty far south on the other side of Israel. But like what a judge does is she makes sure that people, like she's making decisions for people. She's helping people understand what does it mean to do things right, to do things wrong. She's a prophetess, which means she's leading people to God and making sure they know who's like really in charge, all that kind of stuff going on at the same time. So she's the spiritual leader. She's also like the civic leader of Israel. Okay. And then after this chapter, then we go into the Song of Deborah.
Song of Deborah.
We can't. It retells the story. Like you have the stories told to you 2 times.
Pretty much
is what's going on. But what's cool is the Song of Deborah. A lot of like Hebrew scholars will look at the Song of Deborah and will say that it is some of the oldest stuff that we have in the Bible, and they can tell that through like the grammar and the language and the way it uses Hebrew. So like the Song of Deborah is super old. So you have this story happening. At some point in time, the writer of Judges like put all this stuff together, but then he also had this song that had been probably sung or told for a really long time. And it's just kind of cool if you look at it. Like I love like verse 6, verse 7. It says, in the days of Shamgar, son of Anath, in the days of Jael, the highways were abandoned, and the travelers kept to the byways. That means that great plain, like all these low-lying areas. The villagers ceased in Israel. They ceased until I arose. I, Deborah, arose as a mother of Israel. And so you look in the story, and you really see like it's just deserted. And
if you want some just super dramatic version of the story that we just talked about,
you read the Song of Deborah. Yeah.
A whole lot more theatrical.
Like this, like they marched down the remnant of the noble. This is like the Riders of Rohan. Like this is straight.
Yes.
This is the Riders of Rohan. They marched down the remnant of the noble. The people of the Lord marched down for me against the mighty. From Ephraim, their root, they marched down into the valley. Then down, verse 15 again, into the valley they rushed at his heels. Among the clans of Reuben, they were great searchings of heart. So you see like all these people coming in. Verse 19 says, the kings came, they fought the kings of Canaan. So this is not just the guy from Hatzor. This is like what's left of the people that God told them to drive out 100 years before this. It's like the final showdown battle. Okay? At Tanakh by the waters of Megiddo. And Megiddo is crazy. So that's where we get the Valley of Armageddon. Megiddo,
fun name.
Yeah, it's like the tell of Megiddo is like imagine like what we're seeing right now. We get the Washita River farmland out in front of us.
Yep.
Imagine that this was 10 times bigger than it actually is, just straight flat ground, whole 9 yards. And in the middle is this massive fortified hill that's like as tall or taller than the stacks of the energy plant right now.
Okay.
And that's Megiddo. It's an armored fortress. And so they're literally routing these guys through the valley and just picking them off one by one, completely using the terrain to their advantage. Like I can't stress that more, and especially in this story, is like they are Like if you like military history, you like crazy stuff, like this is, they're using it's so much elevation. People in North Louisiana, we don't understand elevation.
Yeah, we don't. Yeah.
But this isn't like Colorado or like in the Smokies or the Ouachita Mountains. Like this is really weird, like super tight elevation where you have crazy, crazy high terrain and then just low-lying farmland that stretches for miles. So these are like massive valleys. And so that's what you have going on in here. Now, I thought about this because I've had a couple conversations with some people about this story, and they're like, or about judges, like, well, where are we going to find redemption inside of this? And I think in this story we do, inside of this, so is that God uses unlikely people. Mm-hmm. So you have Deborah, the prophetess, leading Israel, like way down south. She's creating order, she's settling disputes, and she calls for Barak to come take care of this problem. Like he's living there with homeboy in his backyard, and he has 10,000 soldiers, and he's not fixing the problem. And then Deborah calls, hey, I need you to take care of this. So think back to that map. Like this is half the country that she's traveling to call him down to do that. Barak, he wasn't doing anything. He was a coward. Even when she told him this stuff, he's like, I'm not going to do this unless you come with me. So you have yet again like God using like unlikely people. And then you have the whole Kenites thing. You have the wife, Haber, who is realizing like, we're part of this story. We were asked to take care of this. And she like practices some subterfuge, gets him into the tent, covers him up with a blanket, gives him some warm milk.
Takes care of him, everything.
Yeah, takes care of homeboy, like gives him salt and bread or whatever, like you want to talk about the movies, and then drives a tent stake through his head.
Yep.
And then he comes out, like what's the last part of the story? Like she goes out and she says, I have the man you're looking for.
Oh yeah.
Like whatever that is.
Behold, Barak was pursuing Sisera. Jael went out to meet him and said to him, come and I will show you the man whom you're seeking. So he went into her tent, and there lay Sisera dead, with the tent peg in his temple.
Yeah. Like that's the end of that story. Yep. And so you have Deborah now rules. There's peace in Israel for 40 years because of Deborah's faithfulness. And what I like about this is in this story, which is going to be different from like we're going to hit Gideon up in a couple of weeks.
Oh, yeah.
Like Gideon does some cool stuff, but then decides to like take power in his hands himself. Like you don't see Deborah. Deborah like, let's take care of this problem.
She gives it all to God.
And then let's give it all to God and let's do our thing. So that's the story of Deborah and Barak and Jael and Sisera and all sorts of other names we can't pronounce.
Yeah. A whole bunch of names. There's a lot more names I didn't mention. There. If you come and read this story on your own, there's a lot of information that didn't even come back.
So, what's your most metal moment of the week?
Something tells me it was driving a tent peg into his head. I'd like to argue that.
I think that can be done.
I think that can be considered.
I'm thinking that, like, when I read in one of the commentaries about what this battle probably looked like these guys go into this river and in the water and the mud and the rain. And did you see that movie on Netflix? It was called The King.
No.
Or there's also a Robert the Bruce movie on that. One of those movies, I can't remember which one it is. I think it's The King. And the dude who played Robert Pattinson, who was in like Twilight and stuff, played like this like snooty French king. And then this other guy, and the last battle's in the mud. And they're all in armor, and you just see they're sliding. They can't get their feet on the ground. They can't stand up. It's just like that. I think like there's an episode of Game of Thrones that was in the mud, and they're all like packed in tight. Like I think that the battle on the river, at the River of Slaughter, was the most metal moment. That's what I think.
We'll just have to agree to disagree.
We'll have to agree to disagree. Hey, it's worth agreeing and disagreeing, isn't it?
It's better than driving a stake through your head.
Oh my goodness. Would you rather? Okay, Noah, come here. You're about to be on the show. Okay, come stand right here. So Noah's about to answer this. Noah runs our live stream for us and does all sorts of tech. So Noah, here, you're going to scoot in. You're going to stand between the two of us. We'll be fine. So this is what Noah is going to answer this question. Noah, what do you think is more metal? Having the tent stake driven into your head or the chariot fight while you're sinking in mud?
I feel like the tent stake thing would be like a Mortal Kombat finisher.
Absolutely.
Solid.
And
that's a solid comparison.
Battle with the mud sinking just sounds just sounds like you're just fighting and sinking.
Yeah, yeah. So all three of us are going to be on vacation next week.
Yes, we are.
So we're not going to be doing this next week. We will be back the week after that. And I think that's the story of Gideon, isn't it?
Hopefully.
Yeah. So the Bible is metal.
The Bible is metal.
Chad, Noah, Graham, and glad to have you on the stream. Share with your friends. Come hang out later on. See y'all later.